This stool is so boring. It's all square and stiff. Sorry, it's just so boring. So I'm making two new hardwood stools. Why two? Well, let's just say the first one did not turn out as expected. And I figured out why nobody adds plumbing to these. Let's get into it. I really thought that adding something to this stool that is typically only used in plumbing would be a great idea, but you will see eventually that this did not work out quite as I had hoped and was not such a great idea. This is not going to be the seat, and the hole is not going to be used for that. This is where I'm going to attach the legs. These 3/4 inch steel tube pieces will be the footrests, and I think it will give it a nice industrial look. And as I glue these legs to the base piece, well, let's see if you can spot what I did wrong. I put them on upside down. There we go, that's much better. I was originally going to make plans for this stool because that's a big part of what I do. But it turns out that some of the pieces were not as easy to get as I thought they would be, and this stool was not as sturdy as I thought it needed to be used on a daily basis. For a little peek behind the curtain, I did not intend to make two new stools for my shop. I only made the second one, which you'll see in a few minutes, because this first one didn't quite work out. I'm going to make a round seat for this stool, and this was the first time I tried to make a perfect circle out of wood with my router. And to be honest, this process was really easy, and there were no hiccups here. I just attached my router to this jig and then screwed in the jig to the middle of my wooden square, and boom, I cut a perfect circle with the router. I used this totally normal homemade scroll saw, bandsaw thingy and cut close to the line with the jigsaw and then finished it off with my router and a flush trim bit to finish this perfect circle. Okay, I need to come clean. That was a very condensed version of my trials and errors with the threaded rod and the plumbing flanges. The live version would have been a lot more standing around trying to figure out what to do. And also what I didn't show you is the threaded rod that ended up working did not go all the way through initially. I had to screw it in and unscrew it multiple times until finally it would go all the way through. I don't think that threaded rod is actually meant to fit in that flange, but better lucky than good. There you have it. That is the plumbing accessory I'm using for this build, a flange. Don't get me wrong, a really fun word to say, but not as much fun to use unless you're a plumber, I guess, and I don't know if fun would be the right word. I don't know how well the color of this stool is coming through on camera, but when you add oil to white oak, it turns this sort of golden brown color, and I don't love it. But this is just going to be a shop stool, so I'm not too worried about it, and it's okay, it's just not my favorite. With that being said, I'm going to try a different finish on the other stool that I've used before that looks really good on white oak, I think. But if you disagree and you like the color of this stool better than the other one, just keep it to yourself. I'm just messing with you. But seriously, don't say anything. I was going to market these stool plans as a stool where the seat is adjustable, but after screwing the threaded rod into the base, it turns out it takes a long time and a lot of turns to adjust the seat up or down. So there is mistake number one. It's probably good. So this seat is a little wobbly, but I'm hoping when I add the extra flange underneath that it will fix the problem. And it definitely did fix the problem for a little while. All right, no wobble. All right, holds my weight, little swivel action. That's what we call a functioning stool. All right. I know I joked about how boring this stool is, and it is pretty boring, but it was one of my first projects and I learned a lot building it. For this second swivel stool, I'm using white oak for the base like I did in the previous build, but I'm using a rich mahogany for the seat, and I think the contrast will look really nice, especially since I'm using a different finish for the white oak base. I decided to go with Rubio Monocoat's cotton white for the white oak legs, and it will actually lighten the color instead of darken it to that golden brown, which, again, not a huge fan of. Okay, now for the sponsor of today's video. Me, I'm the sponsor. Actually, I don't know if technically you can consider me a sponsor of my own video, but I will tell you that I have plans for this stool build, which is very easy to build, very sturdy, and looks super nice. And I have plans for a bunch of other shop furniture builds on my website, thomascustomwoodworks.com, and you can find a link in the description below. Okay, let's talk about something else, like how easy this joinery is going to be. I really like using dowel joinery because it's really simple and pretty dang inexpensive. I think this little dowel jig was about $20. I will say that it does take a while to clamp down this jig on every piece and drill all the holes necessary, but you cannot beat the price. I cut the legs and the stretchers to a slight angle, and I think this makes this stool look a lot nicer, and I like the look better than the straight legs of the Mario and Luigi plumbing stool. Although the glue and the dowels would probably be fine, I reinforced each leg with a screw to make it extra sturdy. What I'm going to attempt to do now is use this plug cutter to cut my own plugs to hide these screws. Is it perfect? No, but it hides it pretty well. And who's gonna be staring at your stool that hard anyways? A weirdo, that too, and you probably shouldn't allow them in your shop. One thing that I thought was kind of weird is that this plug cutter would not work unless I started the hole with this awl, but after poking the hole with the awl, the plug cutter worked beautifully. And I will let you be the judge on how well the plug blended with the leg. Not too shabby. I'm happy with it. I always make mistakes no matter what I build. Luckily for this stool, all the mistakes were very minor. Like I ended up making the fit a little too loose for these stretchers, so I had to add these thin pieces of wood to tighten it up, and it worked really well. The fit is nice and tight, and the stool is ready for this 175-pound man to sit on it. Okay, 185. I'm still carrying a little holiday weight from President's Day. Everybody has 7 pieces of cake for President's Day, right? Right? Okay, I have to say it. If you were to move my camera about 1 millimeter to the left or right on most of these shots, you would see an absolute mess in my shop. Even though I added some pieces to make the legs fit tighter, there's still some gaps. What are you gonna do? Actually, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna add this Timbermate white oak colored wood filler to those gaps. And will it match the wood perfectly? Probably not, but I'm hoping it will do a pretty good job. This video is not sponsored by any company, as you know, and this is the first project I'm using this wood filler on, and right when I started using it, I thought to myself, oh, this is what a good wood filler is supposed to feel like when you use it. It was easy to use, dried fast, sanded down nicely, and does not shrink, and I'll cut to the chase, the color matched pretty well. To cut the white oak footrest down to the perfect size, I had to use what I call sneaky cuts. I'm sneaking up on these cuts like the butler in Mr. Deeds. Yeah, haven't thought about that movie in a while, have ya? Because I do not want to cut these pieces too short, and I want about 1/8 of an inch reveal on both sides. This was probably the most complicated part of the build, but it would not be complicated for anyone else building this. It just took me a lot of trial and error to figure out the exact angle I needed to cut the footrest supports and the exact angle I needed to cut the footrests to make sure that they would sit in line with the legs. I guess there was not enough footage of the footrests for that rant, so we're now on to the seat. It's a nice mahogany seat, and I am making it the exact same way I made the seat on the previous stool, with one exception. I took the jigsaw out of its plywood container, and I'm using it as intended. Boring, I know, but it actually made it a lot faster. One of my favorite parts of the process of building anything is putting the finish on the wood and watching that color just pop. Especially if it's a darker wood like this mahogany, the color really comes to life. So let's have some finishing fun. That was weird. Let's put some oil on my wood. I'm just gonna do the thing. I'm using General Finishes Armor Seal for the seat. And I know it looks like I'm just putting straight white paint on the legs, but after wiping it off, it gives it a nice white tint. Some swivel hardware from the Amazon, and it's time for a test. All right, it swivels. Yep, it's a stool, all right. It does stool things. This actually swivels really nice. Ooh, look at that. Nice and smooth. All right. It's been a couple weeks now since I finished this stool, and even though initially there was no wobble or flex in the seat, now is a different story. Yeah, that's pretty bad. If you don't end up making my swivel stool with the slanted legs, that's okay. Just don't make this stool.